Hello, everyone. Welcome and good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Friday.
Happy
Good to
Friday.
see so many familiar faces on the screen this morning. Thank you so much for joining us for our CEO and Joe. We're really excited about today's topic. And we've got a good friend of ours here who is going to introduce our speaker today. Before I get started, I'm going to talk about a couple Zoom rules because it looks like they're coming up. We are gonna make sure to get everybody muted. If you are not muted, please mute yourself. That'll allow us to make sure we have a smooth presentation here. Also, if you can put your name in the chat function for us, that'll allow us to track for attendance. But like I said, we're really excited to have Bill here today to talk to us about the Bay project. And to introduce Bill, I want to introduce our shared board member, Miss Emily Walsh, who's not only one of our chamber board members, but also board member for the Bay Park Conservatory. So Emily, thank you so much for being here and tag teaming this with me this morning.
Of course, and I am so honored to introduce our Chief Implementation Officer, Bill Waddell. He is a certified planner and landscape architect with over 32 years of experience managing the design, public engagement, and implementation process for both public and private projects. He's worked on projects including the Bradenton Riverwalk, Siesta Beach Park, Perry Harvey Park in Tampa, Babcock Ranch Town Center in Fort Myers, and Baker Park in Naples. So in January of 2018, Bill began his journey with us as managing director of the nonprofit Sarasota Bayfront Planning Organization. To work with the design and planning firm Srq to prepare a master plan that reimagines the 53-acre city-owned bayfront. So in January of 2019, when we evolved into the Bay Park Conservancy, he became our Chief Implementation Officer, where we are focused on the funding, implementation, and operation of the Bay Park in partnership with the City of Sarasota to create this amazing place for our community. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Bill.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning and give everybody an update. It's good to see a number of my friends and colleagues joining. So welcome, everybody. I'm really honored and excited to be a part of this amazing initiative for our community. As Emily said, I spent 30 plus years for a planning and engineering firm.
Yeah, I gave it to her.
Working on a number of different parks all over Florida and across the country, but this is one of the most exciting, probably the most exciting that I've been able to be a part of. So
no, you didn't confirm. You just said she was asking when she could.
So Emily, everybody can see the screen here?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So this is an aerial view of our site. For those of you that don't know about these 53 acres, I'll give you sort of a brief overview, a brief history of where we've been, where the city has been on this initiative, and then where we are headed, and as well as progress that we've made to date. So the site actually is today 53 acres, as I said. It's along US 41 and the 10th Street to sort of 6th Street area. Interestingly, it's been in public ownership since the late 1800s, and it's remarkable that over this time that it has not been parcelized up and either developed or utilized in other ways than it has. And so it's incredible that a city like ours has got 50 plus acres along this amazing stretch of bayfront that we have that's available to create this civic legacy. This is a photo from the 30s, which I find kind of interesting. You can see, Emily, can you see my cursor when I move it around?
Yep, I can.
Okay, perfect. So this is about half, this is about 25 or so acres. It was, this is what the site looked like prior to additional filling that was done in the 60s for the Van Wesle. And so a couple things to point out. Here is US 41, looks a little different than it does today. This is the Payne Terminal, which was built as a industrial terminal. And then the first building on the site is the Municipal Auditorium, built in the late 30s. It's on the historic register. There's one other thing I'd like to point out that's in this part of the site here, and I'll zoom in. So this is the site of where our office, the Blue Pagoda, is. And this is an existing pond that's been there over 100 years. It's locally called Tuttle's Puddle. And in the background there, you can see there's a little granite Japanese lantern that was donated to the city, again, close to 100 years ago. And interestingly, here it is. That was the first project that we did. It's about an acre, a sort of little pocket park, and the first implementation that we did. But kind of fun to know that when nothing was on the site, including half of the site, but the auditorium, that pond, and the Japanese lantern was there. And I encourage any of you that haven't been down to the site and have a few minutes to come down here at the corner of 41 and Boulevard of the Arts and see sort of our first little mini park that we have implemented. So this is a view of our site today. It is, of course, houses half a dozen cultural buildings anchored by the Van Wesle Performing Arts Hall that's about 50 or so years old. And you can see the Municipal Auditorium and other cultural buildings. Interestingly, about 2/3 of it is surface parking lot. And because it's evolved over decades, since the 30s, none of the development standards that exist today were implemented. And so every drop of rain that falls on this site, by the way, this is a color aerial. It's not black and white. Most of the site is asphalt. Every drop of rain that falls on this site drains straight untreated into our bay, carrying with it oil and Starbucks cups and excess nutrients, and certainly doesn't help the health of our bay. And so one of the things we're going to do with our initiative is pre-treat all the stormwater that flows on our site and also through our site into the bay. Again, in the aerial view here, you can see a little bit better, of course, US 41 north-south. Here's the auditorium that I mentioned, the Van Wesle. This is Boulevard of the Arts. This is 10th Street, and the roundabout doesn't show, but it's under construction, almost complete, thankfully. And the 10th Street boat ramp, which borders the northern side of our site. So interestingly, this site, as I mentioned, it's developed over almost 100 years. There have been a number of attempts to redevelop the site. The most recent prior to ours was in 2007, where there was an initiative to redevelop, but a master plan done. And for a number of reasons, it failed, including the Great Recession of 08, 09. And so it sat for a while until 5 or 6 years ago, as Emily briefly mentioned. A group of civic leaders got together, formed a group called Bayfront 2020. That group then created a series of guiding principles that were adopted by the City Commission, fundraised $2 million, all of private philanthropy, created a Sarasota Bayfront Planning Organization, and that was done to hire a consultant, Srq, to do a master plan, lead us through a community visioning process, and take it to the City Commission. I mentioned the 6 guiding principles. Those were adopted by the City Commission at the very beginning of the process, and we use those every step of the way through the design and development process to evaluate how we're doing in terms of achieving those guiding principles. Those include aspiration to imagine the possibilities of this amazing waterfront site, creating a green and blue oasis, making it connected and accessible for all, respecting and honoring and building upon the cultural heritage that exists on the site, making it a fun, enlivened destination for children of all ages, and then certainly, and very importantly, making it economically sustainable, setting it up for success in perpetuity. This is the current board that, as Emily said, evolved from the Sarasota Bayfront Planning Organization to the still nonprofit Bay Park Conservancy. Interestingly, there are about 40 park conservancies across the country. Central Park is the oldest. It's about 80 years old. We are the first park conservancy in Florida, which is sort of exciting. And so our key mission is really to be all in and focused on this park, to fundraise, build it in phases, and then operate it over the long haul. The city will still retain ownership of the site, but we will operate on behalf of the city. As I mentioned, the board interviewed and ended up hiring a very talented team of experts across the country and locally, led by the Srq agency team. And we have several local and regional consultants, including Kimley Horn, Sweet Sparkman Architects, Moffitt Nichols, and others. That team embarked upon a process, as I mentioned, that ultimately led to a master plan, but a listening process for 4 or 5 months to listen to identify what the aspirations of the community were, and turn that into a master plan to bring to the City Commission that ultimately was adopted. I'll talk a bit more about that. And so we held a series of workshops, and we heard a lot of different and varying ideas, as you always do, but interestingly, there were a couple of overarching, very important things that we heard. First and foremost, the importance that this be a welcoming place for all in our community to come and celebrate the wonderful sunsets that we have, to view the water, to get out on the water or over the water. Over 90% of everyone that we talked to, expressed that desire. In addition, environmental sustainability was certainly something that was very important. I mentioned the stormwater that falls on our site we're going to be pre-treating over time. We also heard a lot about the importance of financial sustainability, not just to build a great place and then let it decline over time, but rather build it in a way that it can be maintained at a very high level and sustainable in perpetuity. And then also we heard that the amazing history of our community and our site from a cultural standpoint should be reflected in the ultimate design and celebrated and built upon. Certainly, we also heard a number of questions and potential concerns about how you're going to pay for an initiative like this. How are you going to deal with sea levels that are projected to rise? And how are folks going to get there with the challenges that US 41 creates that divide the city, the downtown, from the site? And so based on what we heard, we developed a series of alternatives and then ultimately a master plan that is shown on the right. And that was presented to the City Commission in September and adopted unanimously. It included a number of features, including our phase 1, 10 acres, which is on the south side. I'll talk more about that in a moment. A new performing arts center. As I mentioned, the Van Wesle is about 50 years old, and there's a need. It's also the most at-risk building to sea level rise of the over 200 assets the city owns. And so there's a need and a desire to create a new performing arts center on higher ground. A reimagined 10th Street boat ramp with shops and restaurants and the place where you can get bait supplies. We've got a boater working group we are currently working with, and we're excited about that part of the project. And then also taking working in the existing historic district along US 41, where the auditorium and our building and other buildings are, and celebrating that and enhancing it in a way that celebrates its history. And I mentioned our environmental sustainability part of our project. This is a view down the existing Mangrove Bayou that exists as a part of phase 1. We're going to be, and already are, doing some enhancements there to make it more environmentally sustainable. Interestingly, today there are half a dozen stormwater pipes that bring urban runoff from offsite and dump about 15 million gallons of untreated stormwater straight into this bayou and straight into the bay. That's led to about 2 or 3 feet of polluted silt and has stifled any growth of seagrass and other vegetation. And so we're going to be cleaning that up as a part of our first phase, dredging out the polluted silt and restoring tidal flows along this bayou, as well as providing an enhanced canoe kayak launch for folks to get out on human-powered craft and enjoy the site. We're also, as I mentioned, envisioning a revitalized historic district. This is a view. The municipal auditorium is just peeking there on the right, and of a redeveloped and enhanced art center on the site to, again, celebrate the cultural heritage. And then this is a rendering looking at the enhanced canal district with the sort of an artist rendition of a new performing arts center. and restaurants, and not unlike, if any of you have been to Sparkman Wharf in Tampa, that sort of idea where folks can come along, come to a place and enjoy the water, bring their boat, tie up, and enjoy our amazing sunsets. So a bit more about the process. Again, I mentioned the master plan was approved in 2018. Our partnership agreement, our long-term agreement with the city was approved last spring, which led to us developing an implementation plan, which was a preliminary plan for phase one that was also unanimously approved last fall. And we're currently in the phase one site plan approval process. We're about halfway through, expect to get that done by this fall. And we are then going to begin construction of the phase one, expect to cut the ribbon on that in about 2 years. And then we'll also be negotiating an implementation agreement that will basically spell out the details of how we're going to operate and maintain the park, hours of operation, the kinds of events, how we're going to make sure that it's safe and secure, and those sorts of things. Interestingly, too, I mentioned I've worked on a lot of parks over the years. I think one of the things that's made this a successful initiative is the extensive outreach that we've done with our team, including the local PR and marketing firm at large. To date, we've reached we've had over 6,000 people that have come to almost 100 public presentations that we've had. That includes over 7,000 surveys, both in person and online, and over 100,000 folks that we reach on social media. We continue to do that. If you haven't been to our website and you're interested, thebayparkconservancy.org, there's a lot of content there, including over 100 informational videos about where we're going and where we've been. And also there are a couple of live feeds that you can actually view the fountain garden and progress on the phase one of our park. It's also been very important, as I said, that we have a financially sustainable approach to our initiative. So we prepared a phase one and an overall master plan from a financial standpoint. Our park initiative all in is about $100 to $150 million, depending on the amount of infrastructure that we do along US 41. And our first phase is about $25 to $30 million. We expected to build this project with about 50% philanthropy and about 50% public dollars, and on the public side, state, federal, local, regional grants. The first phase, as I mentioned, is 25 to 30 million. We expect to do that with about 80% philanthropy, and we're well on our way. We think that's important because some of the public dollars take a while for us to sort of ramp up. And again, we're well on our way to having everything that we need financially to both implement as well as maintain our phase one park. So talking briefly about the phase one, it's been important from the beginning that this entire 53-acre park be a park for all of Sarasota, where we can celebrate arts and culture, recreate and have fitness, as well as understand the science and nature of our environment. And so that applies as well for our first phase. This is a view of the adopted master plan. This is our current master plan, and the phase one that I'm going to zoom in on is the 10 acres on the south side. And this is an enlargement. And a couple of key components, the Mangrove Bayou I talked about briefly, that will include an enhanced ADA accessible canoe kayak launch. We're currently building a 1/4 mile, 10-foot wide path around this Mangrove Bayou, providing a number of different environmental pretreatment tools, including a no-mow, no fertilizer zone buffer for drainage that goes in the bayou, a denitrification trench that will pre-treat incoming stormwater, and other components to make that a wonderful environmental feature. We'll have a flexible sort of a lawn area with a concession plaza and restrooms. And then probably the most anticipated part of our phase one is a sunset boardwalk that will go out over the water, where you can come out and watch our amazing sunsets. And there's a view of about 13 miles to Longboat Key to the northwest. And so it's an amazing spot, amazing opportunity. We're very excited about it. And this, of course, is a view looking to the west at a sunset, and you can see the concession plaza, the lawn, and the boardwalk, as well as the enhanced Mangrove Bayou. Couple of more views. This is looking back at the concession plaza. Sweet Sparkman Architects, Jerry Sparkman and his team, as I mentioned, locally are working on this. And They have been inspired by what's known as the original field theory design of the original Selby Library that was on this site, and they're incorporating that in a number of different ways into the Phase 1 architecture, which we're quite excited about. This is another view of the concession plaza looking north from Boulevard of the Arts. These are a couple of views of the Sunset Boardwalk. This one, of course, looking back at the city, and this one looking to the west. As I mentioned, we'll have an enhanced ADA accessible canoe kayak launch that we'll be deploying in the Mangrove Bayou. We've got a wonderful old hammock, oak hammock that has cabbage palms and oaks in it that we're going to have our mangrove walk sort of meander through. Wonderful shade that has existed on the site for over 100 years. And then this is a view of an overlook that we're going to be deploying in the mangrove walk as well. And again, a view of same view of our Phase 1 park at sunset. Brief fundraising update. As I mentioned, we are anticipating that we're going to build the first phase with about 80 or 85% philanthropy. We've had amazing partnership and financial support with 5 major foundations in our community, including the Patterson Foundation, who launched a $5 million challenge grant, $1 million grant initially, and then for every $5 million of private philanthropy we raise, they give us another $1 million that will get us together to the $20 million goal. And we are, I believe, between, I know Veronica Brady's on the line, and so she can give us the minute-by-minute update if needed, but we're at about 17 or 18 million of funds committed. And we, again, are substantially on our way to having everything that we need to break ground on the rest of Phase 1 of our park early next year. So a couple of slides here, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. First of all, why does the Bay Park matter to our greater Sarasota region? Well, more and more cities are realizing that these kinds of outdoor assets are an incredible driver to increase tourism and have incredible economic impacts on our cities, as well as the quality of life in those cities. As I mentioned, we're going to have substantial positive environmental impact. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we believe, especially in times that we're currently in, that we create a place that can bring our community together, all ages, all ethnicities, all incomes, and a place that folks can come that's free and welcoming to all. I mentioned the increased tourism and economic impact. Interestingly, today there are almost 300,000 folks that use the site annually. Over 200,000 come to the Van Wesle, and about over 50% outside of Sarasota, and about a quarter outside of Florida. The Art Center Sarasota has about over 60,000 folks that come through their site. Again, almost a third that come from outside Florida, and the existing 10th Street boat ramp has about 20,000 users, and again, about 3/4 of those come from outside the city. And so it's already a draw, and we don't even have a beautiful park and a new performing arts center. Again, a park like this with all the cultural assets will increase property tax values. It will enhance our image and reputation as Florida's cultural coast, and create revenue both in the state and locally. And also increase regional tourism, which will improve our sales and tourism tax dollars that we can reinvest in our community. We'll have substantial positive environmental impact. I spoke a little bit about that in the Mangrove Bayou. We're also going to be doing habitat restoration and softening the shoreline all across the site. We'll be improving the water quality that goes into our bay, and we'll be creating very interesting and exciting public education opportunities. We've partnered with a number of local organizations, including Moat, to help us think about both the habitat restoration, environmental water quality, but our future public education. And then lastly, a place that will bring our community together. Again, we've established a Conservancy with a long-term partnership agreement with the city that will preserve this land in perpetuity and maintain it and operate it at a very high level. We're going to create iconic civic spaces in 4 to 6 phases over 10 years or so. Again, the first is this Phase 1 that will open in about 2 years. We will increase opportunity for recreation for all in our community. And again, as I previously mentioned, we'll provide free open access for all ages, all incomes, all ethnicities, for our community to come together. And we're very excited about this, and we're very excited about our first phase that will be breaking ground very soon. And with that, I'd be happy to open it up to any questions anyone might have.
So if anyone has any questions, you can write them in the chat, and Brittany and I will, kind of facilitate those and ask Bill questions. But I have a few to get everything started. First of all, that's the first time I've ever heard the pond there by the Blue Pagoda called Tuttle's Puddle. Is that what you said, Bill? Why is it named that?
Yeah, it is. It's I really don't know. Tuttle, I think, is one of our founding fathers. There's probably someone on the phone that or on the call that might know. But I found it on an old survey, and so we sort of refer to it as that. It's very interesting. It's sort of I don't believe it's naturally occurring, but there's no stormwater that goes into it. But the other interesting thing about let me go back to that picture of the Japanese lantern. It was a gift, as I said, almost 100 years ago. It fell into the pond at some point. Someone found it and actually thought it was a bird bath and set it up that way. And then one of our historic folks figured out that, no, this is a Japanese lantern, fixed it. And then we, again, renovated about 6 months ago and opened this park, and we're very excited about it.
That's awesome. So one of the things I'm sure people are explain to everyone how the Bay Park Conservancy, our master plan for the 53 acres, is separate from the new Sarasota Performing Arts Center. Right.
So as I mentioned in our master plan, and let me go back to that. Our park is about $150 million or so to implement the site, the park itself. And convert what is largely parking lot today to Green Park. The Performing Arts Center is a separate initiative, but it's located on our site. It'll be the cultural centerpiece, and that's about a $250 million initiative. And the Van Wesle Foundation is just about to ramp up and begin fundraising for that initiative and hiring architects and moving forward. Interestingly, so we will be creating sort of the site around it, and that organization will be responsible for delivering and fundraising for the new Performing Arts Center. One of the interesting sort of historical facts about the site, the Municipal Auditorium was Sarasota's original Performing Arts Center. And so if any of you have been to any sorts of events in the Municipal Auditorium, I love the building, but if you can imagine that that's where you would go see an orchestra presentation or a concert today, it's very intriguing. And there was, there was a decision 50 years ago to fundraise for and build the Van Wesle, which of course was done in the 60s. But after 50 years, technologies have changed, and so it's very important that the Van Wesle Foundation move forward with a new Performing Arts Center that we'll be incorporating into our new park.
Great. So, and I see we have a question from Deanne. Hi, Deanne. She and I used to work together. But since you mentioned how much it's going to cost, and since our Director of Advancement, Veronica Brady's on the phone, I need to ask these questions. So it's going to cost us $150 million to build the entire park. And you mentioned that 50% we want, is it 50% we want?
Yes.
I know the answer. It's from private or individual donors. And then the other 50% we want from public funding, correct?
That's exactly right. And interestingly, I often get asked, wow, $150 million park, that sounds like a lot of money. How can our community afford that? Well, what's interesting is that when you think about it as a long-term initiative like we are, of about 10 years and 4 to 6 phases, and each phase is around 25 or 30 million. Well, we've got several projects that we've done that are, in that ballpark. The Siesta Beach Park improvements that were done a few years ago were almost 25 million. The Bradenton Riverwalk, when they complete their second phase, will be about 20 million. The expansion of Legacy Trail, is 50 to 60 million. And so it's very doable. We just are going to do it in multiple phases. The other observation I'll make is that park projects like this are often done with 10, 12 or more different funding sources. And so On the private philanthropic side, you know, you mentioned that that will be about 50% of the project. On the public side, we'll probably have a dozen different sources, from state appropriations, federal dollars, to you know, regional grants, and then local city and county dollars as well.
So, and right now we're in negotiations with both the county, Sarasota County, and the city of Sarasota in approving a TIF. Can you, to help fund on the public side, can you explain what that TIF is?
Absolutely. So a number of the projects that I've worked on have been done through with the use of a tool called tax increment financing. The St. Pete Pier that was recently opened in downtown St. Pete was partially done with that. And so what tax increment financing does, it's not a new tax. All that it does is that it recognizes that today this 50-acre site is a parking lot, and folks that live within a few block radius around it look at a parking lot. In the future, they'll be across the street from Central Park. And so that will create substantial dollars in terms of property tax value. And so all a TIF district does is sort of draw a boundary around the properties that are around the site. And as those revenues increase, again, property taxes that will be paid, whether or not there's a district or not, as those revenues increase, that net difference in that district gets reinvested for a period of time to help build the park. And so again, that's a very common tool, but it's a very equitable way for the folks that are receiving property value around the site from the enhancements, can help reinvest those city and county tax dollars into the site for a period of time. And as you mentioned, Emily, we're in the process of negotiating an interlocal agreement between the city and county, and we're very optimistic that we can have that in place by the end of the year.
Great. So, and if people are interested in, individuals or businesses are interested in donating to the Bay Park Conservancy, how do they do that?
Well, you can contact us a number of ways, but one of the easiest ways is to go to the bayparkconservancy.org and connect with us that way, or you can also find our contact information and call us there. And we have obviously a lot of supporters, a lot of followers on our website, and a lot of folks that give not only of their financial means, but also donate their time. And we expect, as we begin to open this park in phases, we expect to have Friends of the Park program that will help us operate the park and keep the park clean and all of that.
So you mentioned phases, and that this is Deanne's question, but first, just so everyone knows that you can connect with us on thebaysarasota.org. There's a place where there's a form you can fill out to become a friend of the Bay. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then there's also a bunch of videos on YouTube, and then also on the Bay Park or the baysarasota.org. There's lots of YouTube videos on there as well. Absolutely. So Dan asked that the phase one, you mentioned that the phase one ribbon cutting is in about 2 years. And she said, what is the estimated timing of when development is complete? How many years off?
So we believe that the entire initiative will take approximately 10 years or so. Certainly that will be driven somewhat by funding and sort of the follow the money approach, if you will. If the money comes in sooner, we can build it sooner. But the other thing that we're trying to do is deliver this in sort of little sort of sub phases, if you will. So I mentioned the fountain garden. We opened that in January. We're working on the Mangrove Bayou, which is, as I said, a quarter-mile path. It's about $4 to $5 million of that first phase. That's under construction now and will be complete right after the holidays of this year. Then we'll begin working on the upland part of the park, and we hope to have that done about a year later. And then the final piece will be the Sunset Boardwalk that will be a couple of years away. And so in doing that, we expect that we can build momentum in our community and build excitement that we're delivering pieces of this initiative, and then that will help accelerate the future phases of the park, including the Performing Arts Center. So
you mentioned the Sunset Boardwalk, and this is one of my favorite features of the park. And I don't know if it shows in any of your pictures, but tell them about the places or how the Sunset Boardwalk was designed to protect the seagrass beds that's underneath it.
Great. That's it. So, one of the things that you can see in this slide, this is the approved master plan in 2018, and this is our current master plan. And it's maybe a little bit subtle, but you can see the original master plan had 2 linear piers that went out due west, and this is a curvilinear boardwalk. Well, what we found is after our master plan was approved, we did a benthic survey of the bay in this area and found that there is a shore parallel seagrass beds. And seagrasses, of course, are sort of the foundation of our estuarine environment and very important to protect and enhance. And so this style boardwalk would have gone right through the seagrass. And so what we did was create, our environmental consultant and design team said, why don't we go over the seagrass and preserve them and then come back on land. And so you can see here, let me zoom in, there are several semi-transparent bridge structures that will be narrower, 8 feet up in the air, and allow light to pass through so that we won't impact the existing seagrass. And then the platform of the boardwalk will be out beyond the seagrass beds, which again, as I mentioned, are shore parallel. The other exciting thing in my mind that we're doing, I mentioned all the water quality improvements that we're doing. We've recently partnered with Moat to do some baseline water quality and biological testing to help us understand what the conditions are today. And then they're going to monitor the improvement over time with all the water quality improvements that we're doing. And we expect that with everything that we're doing, seagrass will begin to grow again in the Mangrove Bayou where none exists. The mangroves will continue to flourish and thrive. And then, all of the critters that sort of live in that food chain in the bayou in this part of the bay, that we'll see more and more of those. And so again, Moat's going to help us look under the water and help us see how that biology improves. And so we're very excited about that partnership moving forward.
Great. So Christy asks, what will the current Van Wesel building be used for once the new Performing Arts Center is opened?
That's a great question. We get asked that a lot. And as I think I mentioned, that the city did an assessment of their 200 assets in the city, and the most at-risk building by far is the existing Van Wesel Hall. In fact, the orchestra pit is below sea level, and the building itself does not accommodate a lot of the kinds of shows like the chandelier and from Phantom of the Opera and other shows. It can't handle those sorts of shows and performances. And so that's one of the reasons a new Performing Arts Center is appropriate. And then what we've talked about with the city is partnering with the Van Wesel Foundation and the city and creating a Blue Ribbon Committee to help us evaluate how this building can be repurposed. Probably not as a performing arts center, but still celebrating the iconic architecture from the 60s that Taliesin West developed. We've heard a number of different interesting ideas. One of them is go back to the original design. It was expanded in 2000, go back to the original shell design and open up some of the walls and make it an open air pavilion that has views to the southwest. And that's a very intriguing one. I'm sure there are a lot of additional great ideas. So we don't know exactly how it will be repurposed, but we've heard our community say that it's an iconic building that we'd love to celebrate and reimagine in some way moving forward.
So Marty asks, will you address plans for parking for visitors?
Yes, so it's interesting. We've hired 3 different parking firms to evaluate existing conditions and then give us a sense of the future. Let me go back to the overall aerial. So today we've got about 1,400 parking spaces on site, the majority of which are empty throughout the day. And of course, to create a green park, we'll need to get smarter about how where we put the parking spaces, how they're shared. And so what we're envisioning is consolidating the parking by potentially expanding a bit to the north, having parking under the new Performing Arts Center, and ultimately when we're complete, providing about 850 or 900 parking spaces on site. one of the things that's interesting, I mentioned this project developed over decades, and every time a new building was built, they built all the surface parking that they needed. Well, when you think about how the site is used, the boat ramp parking, for example, is very busy, during the day and on the weekends during the day, and empty at night. And the Van Wesle needs its parking primarily at night, except for matinees on the weekends. And so there's no reason you can't share the same lot and potentially have boat parking during the day and then maybe parking or valet parking at night. And so that's something that these consultants have helped us think through, is how we stage that and time that and operate. And then the other thing they're saying is the rate of technological change and parking and how people move around cities is changing at an incredible pace. If you think about it, 4 or 5 years ago, most of it had never heard of Uber or Lyft. And now when my daughters go out downtown from Osprey, they wouldn't dream of driving. They call an Uber. And so between that, autonomous vehicles and all the other technology that's coming, there are a lot of folks that are saying we'll need less parking than surface parking than we need today. But the good news is about our initiative, we're going to implement it over time, over 10 years in multiple phases. And as we remove some parking and begin to operate it better, we can evaluate and adjust and adapt as we go.
So sort of related to that, aren't there plans to have pedestrian, I forget what you call them.
Overpasses.
Overpasses over 41?
Yeah, so our master plan reflects up to 3 overpasses. And it's a little bit faint that you can see there's some yellow lines here, one across Boulevard of the Arts, potentially at 10th and potentially into Pioneer Park. One of the things that we have always talked about is letting the roundabouts get built and open at 10th Street, of course, 14th, they're almost complete. Fruitville will be open before the end of the year, and see how those operate in terms of encouraging and facilitating pedestrian flow as well as vehicular flow. We believe that we'll need to build at least one, if not multiple roundabouts, the first of which could be potentially at Boulevard of the Arts. We know that the State Department of Transportation would co-fund those. And so we're envisioning that we build at least one of those, hopefully, and test it and see how the community uses it. Perhaps it could be even designed in a way where it's iconic as a gateway into the city, but also some of the rubber tire, transportation vehicles like the gotcha vehicle that used to run in downtown could come up over it and not have to go through 41. But we're going to wait and see how the roundabouts operate once they're open, get our phase 1 open, and then continue to talk to the city, our consulting team, and the Department of Transportation, and evaluate, when and if those overpasses can be built.
Great. So I don't know if you can go back to the slide with the reading room and the overlook. Someone asked about, how the existing Van Wesle building will be used. And I know that the old GWiz Selby Library building was a bit of a contentious thing. So what are we keeping from the old GWiz building, or how are we paying homage to that building?
Yeah, so that's a great question. This is the site of the old GWiz and original Selby Library building, and it was abandoned for 7 or 8 years once the GWiz moved out. Of course, it was a city-owned asset. They were spending about $100,000 a year just to keep it shuttered, and it needed about $500,000 in capital improvements, and so. And it was also a very difficult building to renovate. And so the city made the decision to remove it and open it up, open this area as, a green park. But one of the things that we asked our Jerry Sparkman and his team to do is to evaluate the original architecture and the sort of field theory design from the original architects out of Chicago and incorporate that into the structures in our phase 1. And so, one of the things that was a part of that original theory was geometric patterns in the design of the building. And so Jerry and his team have interpreted it in a number of different ways, both in the roof structures over the concession plaza that will cast shadows and reflect that design, as well as what is called a reading room. The original library had several outdoor reading rooms that were enclosed as a part of the GWiz, but there's one sort of remnant structure left that we're going to enhance and build and incorporate that field theory design into the Mangrove Bayou. And then we'll have some interpretive signage there that speaks to the sort of history of field theory and the history of the site.
So that's all my questions. Does anyone else have any more questions that we can ask Bill? Brittany, do you have any more?
No, it looks like there's one more question, which I think we might have addressed some of the parking. Will you address plans for parking for visitors? But I think Bill kind of touched on some of the new technology in that. So Bill, if there's anything else you want to expand on that.
Well, I think, again, the only thing I'd offer is that as we, certainly we heard that getting across US 41 is certainly a challenge today, and that it's something that we need to solve for in the future, work with the city and the state and work through that. And so we'll be doing that, and whether it gets solved through roundabouts or overpasses or other means, that's an issue that we'll continue to work on so that more folks can walk, ride their bike, and get across 41 into the site as as our city continues to grow. And then again, our overall plan is to provide parking sort of around the perimeter, and then green park along the waterfront. And so we'll be deploying that over time, over the next 10 years or so. And again, as we build it out in phases, we'll evaluate how we're doing and have the ability to adjust as we go.
So since you have this slide up, you can kind of see the parking. What's the parking situation going to be like for phase one?
So phase one, there will be on-street parking as exists today on Boulevard of the Arts, and about 15 spaces or so, primarily disabled spaces, as well as loading and unloading for the canoe kayak launch. But what we have done, let me get back to the master plan, is we have still got about 1,300 spaces. Where's my overall plan? Here we go. So here's the phase one, and we've got about 1,300 spaces that exist and will remain. And this entire site is about a 5-minute walk from any parking space on the site. And so we've created a number of accessible sidewalk ramps that you can park in the Van Wezel lot during the day and cross the bridge and walk in. We've also built several sidewalks that you can park in this 150 space historic district lot and walk into the Mangrove Bayou walk and in. And so we're encouraging folks again to park in the perimeter and walk in, as many of the great parks do, around our country. And then, as I said, we'll evaluate how the sort of parking and mobility operation is working and adapt as we go.
Great. So Molly asked a question. I'm trying to think if we've addressed this or not. Oh, okay. So she asked, as you mentioned, Bill, the whole thing is probably going to take about 10 years. So she's asking, that 10-year period, did that start after we got the master plan approval in 2018, or 10 years after phase one is complete?
That's a great question. Is it a rolling 10 years?
Yeah.
No. Yeah, in my mind, no. The 10 years started when we got our approvals and began construction of the fountain garden and the mangrove walk. And so I would say we're a year or so into our 10-year initiative. And again, that may get a little, might take a little bit longer depending on what we find, or it might be a little bit shorter. We'll see. But I think we're very optimistic that as we open this first phase in the next couple of years, that it will generate momentum and interest. And as we get our TIF district in place with co-funding from the city and the county, we're going to work really, really hard to get this whole project done in less than 10 years. And I'm very optimistic we can do it.
Great. Okay, we have one more question.
And I have one additional question too, Emily.
Okay.
I just had one sent to me privately, but they're asking if the penny tax will help fund the bay.
So sure. That's a great question. Of course, the current penny tax has been allocated to other projects, but it will come up again for vote in a few years. And so in a year or two, we'll start talking in our community about how that funding might get allocated. And we're certainly going to be a part of the conversation, and hope to get a portion of that penny tax to help fund future phases of the project. But that's a great example of, if we can get some of these public funding sources as well as, generous gifts from the private community sooner, that is what will then drive us being able to deliver this project sooner.
Great. And I thought it was a question, but it was just a nice comment that was sent to the group. So last chance for anyone for any last questions. Okay, Bill, I'll thank you first, and then I'll pass it over to Brittany to close, but that was a great presentation and discussion. Very exciting for the future of Sarasota.
Thank you all very much. And again, as Emily said, I would encourage anybody that has not become a follower on social media, we'd encourage that. We'd encourage you to go to thebaysarasota.org and look at some of stay up to date on that. And then anyone, if you haven't been out on the site lately, I'd encourage you to come down and enjoy the fountain garden and the view and the initial sort of glimpse of what phase 1 is going to be like when we're complete.
Ooh, I have one last question. The fountain, we have it on now, and how many years has it been since the fountain was actually on and running?
That's a great question. I've been meaning to ask, some of our old timers in the community. I've lived here 20 years and I don't recall the fountain running in that site. Maybe it did, but we're excited about that. And the other fun thing about the fountain garden is that we deployed a number of our water quality tools, including a no-mow zone and no fertilizer zone around it. And we're in the process of restocking it with additional fish and adding aerators. And so we've got sort of this little mini quarter-acre pond that we're testing out a lot of our water quality theories and strategies, and we'll be deploying them throughout the site as we move forward.
I think they're working, because I remember that pond being like this grody green color, and now it's like turning blue. So that's good.
Yeah, it's getting there. It's a little brownish shade of blue, but it's getting there. We're working on it.
That's better than green.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, Bill, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today. We're definitely so excited about this project. Before we close, just want to put 2 bugs in your ear. One is some upcoming events that we have. So on August 5th, we have our Meet the Candidates with our City Commission candidates for District 3. And then August 14th, our next CEO and Joe is going to be with Rick Piccolo from the Sarasota Bradenton International Airport. And then if you have not heard about our Buy Local campaign, our Srq campaign is focused on shopping local, buying local. If you take a picture of you at a local restaurant or retailer and either email it to us on the team, you can email it to me, you can email it to communications@sarasotachamber.com. You can tag us in the photo, but we are raffling off $400 gift cards a week. So I see Julia just mentioned in the chat, the prizes are real. She was one of our winners last week. So just encouraging everyone to buy local. I hope you guys have a great weekend. It's great to see you all virtually, and take care. Thank you.
Thanks all. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.